Welcome to a new Daily Top Askreddit video. Today's topic.
What's the most shocking thing you found out about someone you know? An acquaintance, really. He was a friend of a friend. Our friend had a pool and would have us over regularly for barbecue. We had a 2-year-old and I was heavily pregnant. My husband was carrying the things and our daughter ran ahead of us. She had been there many times before and was comfortable there. She did not have floaters on yet and she ran and jumped into the deep end of the pool ahead of us. We all ran, but the acquaintance was by the pool and he reached down and pulled her up. She stuck her hand up when she realized it was too deep. We had a great afternoon at the pool and we visited with this man. He had grandchildren and was much older than us. We came away with positive vibes from the day. My husband saw him more frequently than I and played golf with him and his friend. We moved away about a year later and were shocked to find out that he had brutally and violently sexually abused his young granddaughters. That's never gotten out of my head. I found out a couple years ago that one of my 2 best friends I had growing up regularly raped her younger brother when they were kids. It was my other best friend who told me. You just never expect that from people you know. My cousin did that to me when I told my mom. She was shocked and then realized why I never wanted to go to family gatherings or to their house. People can hide things like that well. And people also don't look for it to be happening to their kids. Humans are never 100% bad. Very few are incapable of goodness. I think that's what scares people the most. Ted Bundy worked at a suicide prevention hotline. Anne Rule was his co-worker and she wrote The Stranger Beside Me about him. Apparently, Ted hadn't committed any murders yet during that time that are provable. Almost every single serial killer, child rapist, molester, etc. Someone has a story about them where they did something nice or were a great friend. My opinion is it also helps offset their moral compass a bit. I do this extremely bad thing, so I'll do a very small nice thing and in my head it evens out. I devastated a child, but I gave a homeless man $1. That counts, right? The most successful abusers are good at selecting vulnerable victims and also seeming helpful and kind to their community. My wife died 2 years ago at a young age, 49. A week later I decided to go through her personal devices to see if there were any other friends or family that needed to be contacted. What I found instead is that my wife had always been chasing after other men during our entire 12 years together. When she met me, she had a side BF that she was crushing on, but his life was too much of a mess for her to seriously consider him as a suitor. She was a single mom with 2 kids, and needed stability. But she loved the attention he showered her with, constantly begging her for sex. And there were other men, too, that she met online. In total, I was up to 6 BFs she had during the time of our relationship. I stopped digging because each new BF revelation absolutely destroyed me. It did explain, however, why our relationship stalled after we moved in together. She became disinterested in growing deeper in relationship with me and was doing the minimum to keep stringing me along because I was paying the bills for her and her kids. And because I genuinely loved her, I was always hoping things would eventually get better between us. But things were never going to get better, only worse, because she was actively sabotaging our chances. Ouch. Just ouch. My father had always said that my step-grandfather and biological grandmother had rescued each other. But he was an English duke and she was a divorcee with 4 children in upper-class England in the 60s, the horror. The scandal. So I never understood what he meant. Turns out step-grandfather's first wife had had a mental breakdown, killed the 2 children, was found wandering their estate covered in blood and spent the rest of her life in an insane asylum. I didn't find this out by being told by my father. Oh no, that would require English people to actually talk to each other. I found out by Googling my step-grandfather's name out of curiosity when I was in my 20s. I worked with an ex-Marine for years, and like closely for years. My last day I asked him to help me with something and he said, "Oh sure, ask the guy with 1 leg." I told him he was full of shit and he took a hammer and hit his shin, to which I heard metal. Thinking it was a joke I asked him to lift his pants. Sure enough, this man had 1 leg and I never knew. I worked with a guy for 4 to 5 years. He was even my boss at one point. He always carried his suit jacket draped over his right hand. I never gave it a second thought. One day I went to shake his hand, which I for whatever reason had never done before, and he looked at me like, "WTF bro, are you kidding?" He then extends his right arm, and for the first time ever, I realized he didn't have a right hand. I honestly can't remember now if he wore a prosthetic hand or simply left it as a nub, but I do remember apologizing profusely. He just laughed it off and thought I had been fucking with him. It made me feel like I was a lunatic and an asshole at the same time. I have a friend whom I've known for a few years. We've worked together at a couple of different places, and we get along great. He's a bit of a jackass, but generally a fun guy to talk to and hang out with. We were already in our 40s when we met, and obviously, everyone has a past, but when he told me he'd spent nearly a decade in prison for attempted murder, I was shocked. I didn't believe him. He was telling me the story of what happened, and everything seemed to make sense. He was young, just 18, and he was on drugs and suffering from mental illness. When I got home that night, I did some digging and found some records that indicated he was being truthful about it. It didn't really change the way I saw him or how I felt about him at all. He's still the same person I've known all these years. Now I just know a bit more about his past than I previously did. I don't see him as more dangerous. It's just a tragic story about a kid who did something awful, paid for it, and worked his way back into society. Co-worker served 18 years for murder. Fell afoul of a law that allows someone to be charged with a crime by being with someone who committed the actual crime, even if they had no knowledge of said crime. He drove his neighbor to a shop and waited for him. The neighbor shot and killed the clerk while robbing him. The neighbor even testified that my co-worker had no idea what was going on. Nice guy. We still talk over FB. I'd be fucking pissed if I was your coworker. 18 years for a crime you didn't commit, plus he didn't have any knowledge he was an accomplice. My daughter-in-law got with a guy and was with him for 10 years. She had a daughter before she met him who was 4 when they started going out. They went on to have a son who is now 8. We found out a year ago that he's been sexually abusing my granddaughter since she was 12. He got her pregnant and bought abortion tablets for her. He awaiting trial for 18 counts of sexual assault on a child. He seemed like a nice enough guy and we had no idea until it came out. Someone wrote, I think it was in reference to the Bill Cosby cases, that abusers groom their character witnesses every bit as thoroughly as they groom their victims, and I've never been able to forget it. Fuck that guy. Hope he suffers daily in prison. If he's convicted on one of the child rape charges, he's looking at 16 years starting, but he has lots of aggravating factors, so might get the maximum of 20 years. He'll serve 14 years and then be considered for parole. He killed Jeffrey Dahmer. No shit. I grew up in the same neighborhood as Chris Scarver. I didn't even know that was him till I attended a friend's wedding. Another guy and I were catching up and he said, "You heard about Chris, right?" I replied, "What did that crazy unfair do this time?" He replied, "He killed Dahmer." Then it hit me that I saw him on TV and didn't even recognize him. No way, my mom used to be Chris Scarver's prison guard. 2 Redditors 1 cup. Apparently, what triggered him was that at meals, Dahmer kept arranging his food in the shape of little arms and legs. https://6abc.com/amp/jeffrey-dahmer-christopher-serial-killers/6888971/ He thought broccoli was spelled broccoli. I love Reddit. In 3 scrolls 1 went from, I knew the guy who killed Jeffrey Dahmer, dead wife was having affairs for the whole 12 years we were together, 2, he thought it was spelled broccoli. Palate cleanser between child abuser's face with cold sweat. This one is a relief after all the awful shit I just scrolled through. Life's short, let him misspell it. I bet he spelled cauliflower wrong too. We found out at the funeral that my wife's grandpa had a second family. There was a group of people huddling around his widow, she was 90 at the time, that no one recognized. They were chatting it up with grandma for quite some time and eventually my wife's dad and aunt asked him to leave. There was kids, adults and seniors in this group, multiple generations of people. My mother-in-law finally fessed up and said they were his other family. Jaws hit the floor and it was really weird for the rest of the ceremony. They also tried to claim some of his stuff afterwards. Had to watch grandma's house like a hawk cause they would snoop around and try to say he would want us to have this. Quote, having secret second families, another business ruined by millennials. A second family, not in this economy. If he had wanted them to have it, it would have been in their house. We should maybe take into account that grandpa is a piece of shit here. Not maybe a piece of shit. He's a piece of shit. Maybe they did feel entitled to something. I can't say if they're right or wrong. It's the sort of thing lawyers should work out. Wasn't the funeral, but my mom and uncle found out my grandpa had another family after he was admitted for a heart attack and they showed up to visit. Woozy face. Is this a thing? My grandpa was on his deathbed in the hospital and the other family showed up, all 12 of them. I found out as an adult that my stepdad, who had been around since I was 7, did time in prison for murder. He walked in on a man having sex with his wife and it didn't end well for the other guy. Edit for clarity on some of y'all's questions ***. This happened like 20 years before he met my mom. He did 3 years because of the nature of the crime and laws in Texas being lenient on that type of stuff. I'm sure from that moment on you did always eat your vegetables. And didn't have sex with that guy's wife. My dad committed tax fraud, perjury, and identity fraud against me to the Canadian government. I am a disabled university student, he is a pilot that makes $300,000 per year. I have childhood friends who discovered after the dad's death, the kids were adults by then, that the dad had fraudulently taken out full powers of attorney on them, refinanced his house in the names, and never paid any taxes. A high school friend became a multi-millionaire through reposting memes on Instagram. He was a pretty ordinary guy, but had a great sense of humor and an ever-expanding meme collection. In between working at KFC, he was reposting memes on pages he made. Eventually, he sold an account for $10,000 and began managing 10+ huge accounts, cross-promoting them. He began selling accounts for $50,000 every month or so. This was in the early days of when Instagram first became a chronic meme location, so like 2016 when its identity shifted. He vanished eventually, closing off most of his school connections. Nobody except his closest friends get in contact with him. I'm still connected to him, and he's just traveling the world permanently now, in his 20s. He can retire from memes. He did this before it became highly competitive and automated. Now everyone is competing for internet meme attention, and there's thousands of botted pages that automatically do this. I actually met a kid once like this. When I was traveling around Japan circa 2016, I met this 19-year-old kid who just sold his SoundCloud page for like $20,000. He used that money to travel but also bought a really expensive camera to take pictures with on Instagram. Pretty quickly he started getting sponsored posts and his IG account was pretty big, 100k followers. So he basically was traveling indefinitely and getting paid for each of his posts. Dude cracked the system. It's insane to think we live in a time where you can become a millionaire by reposting pictures, lol.